Welcome to Popternative, where we dive into topical discussions from the worlds of pop culture, social media, and sports. Here is your host, Peter Remoliotis, aka PD Beats.
Hello, and welcome to the Popternative Podcast. This is the podcast where digital discussions, the worlds of pop culture, social media, sports, all that jazz. As always, I'm your host, Peter Remoliotis. On Twitter, I goes PD Beats. Really excited to be with my guest this afternoon. He is an actor. You might have seen him on Man in the High Castle on Amazon Video. Lee Shorten is with us. Lee, welcome to Popternative, man.
Hey, thanks for having us, man. For real. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Icebreaker, when did you kind of decide that you wanted to act?
It was pretty late in life, actually. I think I was about 29 when I decided that it was something I wanted to get into. So yeah, a lot of people are like, oh, I dreamed of it since I was a kid or whatever. But
I interview a lot of athletes, a lot of hockey players. I want to have that first guest that doesn't say what you just said, like that everyone says. I don't like, as soon as I was, a kid, I wanted to play hockey. I want to have that first hockey player that was like, oh, it was only until I was like 12 that I wanted to do it. But I don't think I'm going to have that, but it would be awesome.
Because I think with, not that acting isn't a skill, but especially for like sports, you've got to put in those hours, right? Like if you don't start when you're like 5, I think you're so far behind the 8 ball of like, where everyone else is in their development.
So for a lot of people that don't know, you are on Man in the High Castle, which is a crazy, terrific show. Dystopia. It's fantastic. It looks good. Like the imagery of it is insane. Talk a little bit about your character and give a little glimpse of what the show is about for people who have not kind of seen it.
Sure. So it's based on a Philip K. Dick novel. For those who don't know that, and he's like a really famous sci-fi writer. He did what Blade Runner was based on, a Minority Report, and like a bunch of stuff. So it's the premise is like a what if, and the what if is what if the Axis powers won World War II? So what if the Italians, the Japanese, and the Nazis won? And then the show is set in America in the 60s, and Japan and Nazi Germany occupy America. So the Japanese have the West Coast and the Nazis have the East Coast. And it sort of just explores what America would be like under those two powers.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, basic premise.
And your character, Sergeant Yoshida?
Yeah. Excuse me. So I play Sergeant Yoshida, who is a member of the Japanese secret police, the Kempeitai. And he's the right-hand man to the chief inspector of the Kempeitai, who's one of the main villains, Inspector Kido. And the interesting thing about Sergeant Yoshida is he's one of the very few Asian Americans in the show, because most of the Japanese characters that you meet have come over from Japan to establish the rule. So he was always fun to play because you're exploring that interesting. He grew up American, but now he's kind of switched allegiance to the Japanese and how he kind of navigates that world and the differences, which is fun.
No, absolutely. How did that opportunity came to be? I mean, we all know, you auditioned for it, the standard stuff. But when did you kind of get a hold of the script? Like, what was going through your mind? Like, what was happening there?
Yeah, it was interesting because I heard that this show was shooting in. It was going to go to picture, and I'd always been a huge Philip K. Dick fan and a Ridley Scott fan too. So when you have like Ridley Scott and Philip K. Dick come together, I just called my agent and said, "Listen, no matter how small the role is, just get me in the room to audition because I love these two guys and I just want to say I've been on the show." Mm-hmm. So I went in for this guy called Suited Man. Who was just like a tiny 1-episode, 1-day thing. But luckily for me, they really liked what I did. And then the producers were like, hey, what if we gave the Suited Man a name, Sergeant Yoshida, and we'll expand his role and we'll bring you back and we'll make you more part of the cast. Mm-hmm. So that was like, yeah, that's kind of like the dream come true for an actor, right? You go for this small thing and it grows. So
that's
for
awesome.
me, because, yeah, thank you. I mean, inevitably in television, there's always a bit of like ongoing change. But especially I think for my character because he wasn't originally part of the big picture. So every week it was like getting a new script and trying to figure out, okay, what direction are we going now? What's different now? And it's kind of an ongoing development, which is fun.
No, absolutely. You mentioned, the big picture, and what I find one of the big picture right now in the television and film industry with all the unbelievable content out there on streaming services is just insane. Now, I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of actresses, a lot of actors, and I want your opinion on this as well. It's a double-edged sword, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinions, because for one, there's opportunities out there that there weren't before for young up-and-coming actors like yourself to kind of get out there. There's bigger chance, to be part of the Marvel universe because they're just like pumping out shows all the time. And even it's like the man in suit role, for one episode, you know what I mean? Like opportunities, you know what I mean? So there's that. So you can look at it as a good thing. Then there's the other side of it, which I'm sure you're not really looking at, but it's the reality where the competition is bigger than ever because now with more opportunities there's more people that want to get involved, so the casting, the auditions, it's gonna that whole aspect of it has become a lot saturated, so it is a little bit of a double-edged sword. Have you ever thought of it like that?
Yeah, it's yes, definitely. Although I kind of think about it, maybe not in that way, but in a similar way. Like I think 2 years ago there were like 500 different shows on across like television networks.
it tripled.
Yeah, I think like the hard thing is getting on a show that actually hits. A show that people actually watch and that kind of gets renewed and goes on and becomes the thing. Because there's so many shows that are like great, but not enough people are watching them. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the scary part because you're like, as an actor, all you want to do is work, and you're like, yes, I I landed this amazing job. And then it's like, oh, no one's watching the show, and it's canceled. So I think that's the scary thing, I think.
Or the aspect too of being on, like you said, being on a show, you're a lead, and it gets canceled after one episode, and there's or canceled after one season. Because I find it's getting rarer and rarer that shows get canceled after one or two episodes. It still happens, but I feel like it hasn't happened as much anymore. You have this opportunity now of like Netflix, Amazon, Hulu to kind of maybe those shows that would get canceled on major networks will now like be on Netflix and get an opportunity. But now what I find interesting is Netflix is starting to act like a network now, right? Netflix is starting to cancel shows. Amazon's starting to cancel shows. It's shifted.
Yeah, I mean, they have to because, they only have they have a lot of money, but they still have a finite amount of money. So, they still have to pick and choose because if they never cancel anything, they would be able to make new shows and whatever. But, I mean, look, the best part about streaming services to me is they're not funded by advertising, so they can take more risks and they can think outside the box. Whereas, when you go to a traditional network, they have to answer to these companies that are trying to sell a product. So that's where, like a lot of those companies, like, well, our target demographic for our serial or whatever is, young, attractive white people. So you have to put young, attractive white people on your show. Whereas a streaming, service can take more risks and can use more diverse actors or actors who aren't like ridiculously good looking, and you can get your more real grounded shows like Breaking Bad and shows like that, which is good for people like me.
No, absolutely. And like Charles Baker, who played Skinny Pete on Breaking Bad, like he's been on the show before as well. And
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, he's amazing. And he kind of had a theater background, and a lot of people I've had on the show kind of have that theater background, and then they move towards kind of the bigger screen and the television shows. And that kind of brings me to the idea of all the different evolutions in the streaming world, which you talked about as well. Do you kind of also think that web series, like smaller shows that are like 10 minutes long, because there's still a market for that and there's an opportunity to watch them. Do you think that there's still a place for those, like, digital shorts and all of that, like that, because that's evolving as well, right? And then they're creating them into they like them, and then they make them into a actual show. They get green light, they get a pilot, they go from a 10-minute web series to half an hour, 45 minutes.
Yeah, I mean that's what happened with Portlandia, right? I think
Yep.
it was originally you know, it's great. You know, technology is beautiful because I suppose back in the day where you had to actually have to buy film, you know, film was expensive, so only really, you know, rich people, I guess, could become filmmakers and take that risk. Whereas now with digital cameras, anyone can kind of do it. So, you know, it's nice that more people can make film. But again, like back to what we said, it's a two-edged sword because now there's so much content. So, I mean, I think it's like anything. You can have there's always going to be a place for web series to like try new things and maybe write yourself projects that for roles that you're not being seen for in the main, or try to, as you say, do something to say, hey, can you fund this for a real thing? But yeah, it's hard, right? Because there's so many web series to get it to stand out and to get people to watch it it's tough.
No, absolutely. It was kind of cool because, and I wasn't expecting, but I did an interview with two members of a pop punk band called Broadside, and we were talking about about Spotify. We're talking about streaming music and all of that.
Right.
And the one thing they brought up, which I found very interesting, is they were talking about our society gets something, thinks it's cool, and then it's gone. And then I was like, so you guys are kind of talking about binge watching because a season comes out, you watch it,
Right.
and then it's gone. You have to wait like a year for season 2. You know what I mean? I wanted to know, you being on a television show that, you know, it was kind of like a season was kind of thrown right away and you can watch all the episodes. What do you kind of think of that transformation of the industry, going from waiting week after week to boom, 12 episodes, you could do it in a week, a day or two, and then, but after that, it's done for a year.
Yeah, it's like everything, but I think the theme of today's conversation is two-edged sword. It's definitely got its benefits because, you know, people can consume it as quickly as they want, you know, and then you're right, they can kind of talk about whatever. And by the same token, if you can hear about Man in the High Castle 6 months after it's come out and then get in and watch it, as opposed to if you missed, you know, the first 3 episodes of it, if it was traditionally, you'd have to wait to catch up or try to find reruns. So that can be good. But yeah,
You get sad though. You watch it and then it's over for like a year.
I think I'm used to it because I guess I used to, well, I still do it. I read a lot, right? And it's like you get your book and you read your book and then you're like, oh, especially with like Game of Thrones, gonna have to wait 5 years for him to finish the next novel. So, yeah, maybe I'm more used to that kind of binging mentality, right? So.
No, absolutely. We had our first author on the show, Delilah S. Dawson. She wrote the Star Wars Phasma book.
Oh, that's cool.
So we had her on the show, and yeah, those perspectives are interesting because I find it completely different. You know, an actor on a show, you know, goes out and they get recognized for photos, but unless it's a really big name, authors. There's a lot of authors I know the name, but I don't think I could like tell you what they look like, and I think they like that.
Yeah, I think they do. I think they do.
The reception of Man in the High Castle has been fantastic. It's one of those shows that people love. People are talking about the dystopia concept of it. Those shows that kind of go out there, these whole different worlds, Westworld on HBO. Do you think that like you kind of said, there's been like a creative boom all of a sudden with all these new shows, and maybe they're not as censored as much, so they can kind of go above and beyond. I just wanted to know for you personally, for Lee Shorten, what's kind of the ideal television show for you? Do you like kind of the ones that are kind of very complex? Do you like the miniseries? Do you like the shows that season after season, there's different, like, characters just completely change. Their dynamic is different. What do you like in a good television show, Lee?
I mean, like I like
a lot of things. There's a lot of things, but
there's a lot of things. And I watch the spectrum from, you know, like just the really like cheesy, you know, there's not really anything to it, to the really complex stuff like Black Mirror and Westworld and stuff. But yeah, I guess, you know, my favorite kind of stuff is the really challenging, intellectual stuff that's very character driven. So, I do love the Breaking Bads, and I love Westworld and Black Mirror. So yeah, shows that kind of explore the darkness, really, and kind of challenge you with it is kind of my thing.
No, absolutely. I think we'll wrap up here, but Lee, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It was cool.
It's a new year, it's 2018. What can we expect from Lee Shorten that you're allowed to tell us? Because I know, the whole thing, there's stuff you probably can't tell us, but what do you hope to accomplish in 2018? What's the haps? What's going on?
Right. Well, like any actor, I hope I'm working this year. But yeah, there's a few things coming out. I'll be on Arrow in a couple of weeks, and I got a Disney movie that I had a small part in coming out at the end of the year, and another movie doing South by Southwest that I can't really talk about, but yeah. So just keep an eye out, I guess.
Where can people follow you on social media?
Oh yeah, you can get me on Twitter or Instagram, and it's just LC Shorten. So.
Awesome, short and sweet.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, this has been Popternative. You can catch previous episodes of Popternative on YouTube for the video version, so subscribe there. Leave us a comment, leave us a like. Wherever you listen to podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, we're everywhere. So subscribe there. You can get the audio-only versions of those. Be sure to check out popternative.com for amazing content from the digital media, sports, and social and pop culture world. And until next time, this is Lee Shorten and Petey Beats signing off. Enjoy the rest of the week.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube. Be sure to like Popternative on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.